We take a look at the big Ravens news that happened over the weekend, as well as talking about what Eric DeCosta had to say in his end-of-season press conference next here on Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And we returned here with another episode of Locked On Ravens. I am your host, Kevin Ostreicher of Ravens Wire. Today's sponsor is Get Upside. Just download the free Get Upside app and use promo code touchdown to get 25 cents per gallon or more cash back on your first tank. We're back here. It is another week of talking Ravens football. And really after a couple of weeks right after their season ended of kind of laying low and not really making a ton of noise, the Ravens have been making all kinds of noise. They've been banging drums and doing everything to really at least shape what they can of this team so far. And they've made a couple of big coaching moves. Obviously, the parting of ways with Don Martindale, the replacement for him being Mike McDonald. You have a couple of coaches who have taken opportunities elsewhere or just have been parted ways with as well. And now there's a couple of other things that we missed over the weekend here that we're going to talk about here today on Monday here in our first segment, because it is a lot to talk about, and it's important to kind of understand why these moves happen, why the Ravens chose who they chose, and kind of the guys who are coming in, going out, and things of that nature. And then in the second and third segments, we'll talk about what Eric DeCosta had to say to the Baltimore media during his Friday end-of-season press conference. We didn't get the chance here to talk about it, and same thing with John Harbaugh and with Mike McDonald. I think it is very important to just talk about what the vision for this team is. Eric DeCosta is a big part of what the Ravens do. He's not playing on the field. He's not coaching them, but he makes the personnel decisions. He is a big voice, obviously a very important figure in that organization, and just how he's feeling is very important. So in the second and third segments, we will talk about that. This was going to be a mock draft Monday episode, but I decided to start that next week just because the Super Bowl will be over at that point. We'll know the full entire draft order, and while we do know the Ravens are picking at number 14, I just think it'll be better if we start the mock draft Mondays next week when the season is officially over and we can get into full offseason mode. And obviously there's a ton of news to talk about here today, so it kind of worked out well. But let's dive into that news here. Before we do that, though, if you're here with us on YouTube in video form so you can see my face and my background, be sure to subscribe to the channel. Our first goal here is 1,000 subscribers, and we're growing at a really fast rate. I really appreciate everybody who has already subscribed. And for those who have not and are watching now and maybe plan to subscribe, I thank you for your future subscription. It does help out a ton. Like the video as well. And if you're here with us in audio form, I'm not forgetting about you guys either. Thank you so much for listening. And if whether this is your first time or your 300th episode, your 600th episode with me here, thank you for tuning in, making Locked On Ravens your first listen of the day. Be sure to follow us anywhere you get your podcasts. So that could be Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and more. And be sure to follow me on Twitter at KOstreicher34 and the Locked On Ravens account at Locked On Ravens. So let's dive into this news here. Just a couple of quick notes. Honestly, it's a Ravens news notes and quotes segment. And we'll start with the Pro Bowl. Let's start with that Pro Bowl. Now, the Pro Bowl used to be, one of the best all-star games in sports. You go back and you look at all the highlights from, now we can call them the good old days, because what we're witnessing now is just, it's not football. It's two-hand touch. The players aren't trying. It has really become, I don't want to say an embarrassment, but it's just not good. It's not fun to watch anymore. I mean, you go back, you look at the Sean Taylor hit, those are the types of plays that people want to see in the Pro Bowl, the spectacular plays like that. Now it's just, they're losing viewership, it feels like, and it's just not a good spectacle. But good news for the Ravens is Mark Andrews performed in a very big way. Now, he was snubbed for the 2022 Offensive Pro Bowl MVP. I mean, we can say what it is. The MVP award, whether it's the actual NFL MVP or whether it's a Pro Bowl MVP, it is for quarterbacks in the NFL historically. Now, there have obviously been non-quarterbacks to win the awards. I'm not saying it's solely quarterbacks 100%, but generally it is a quarterback award and they will be favored. It's a little easier for them to get it. So Justin Herbert wins it. He completes 7 of 11 passes for 98 yards, 2 touchdowns, and an interception. Mark Andrews caught 5 passes for 82 yards and 2 touchdowns. I mean, honestly, I would give it to Andrews in that situation. Herbert had the interception, but it is a quarterback award. I'm not trying to take anything away from Herbert. Like, I'm not saying that his performance was awful and he didn't deserve it. Like, I think both players deserved it, but I'd give it to Andrews personally. But yeah, there was nothing really exciting. Justin Tucker hit 3 extra points. I mean, it was a high scoring game because nobody played defense. I mean, there wasn't a field goal attempted. There wasn't a punt. I mean, it was just kind of like, all right, we're going to score here. We're going to turn the ball over. We're going to score. I mean, I don't know. The Pro Bowl is something that we're not going to spend a lot of time on because I don't think a lot of people spent a lot of time on it, watching it on Sunday. Unfortunately, I hope that the NFL can kind of make it a bit more fun to watch in future years, but it was very disappointing this year. And, looking on Twitter and just the landscape of social media and the internet, it seemed like most people agreed that it just wasn't a fun thing to watch. So that's unfortunate there, but hey, Mark Andrews had a good day. So we'll take that here in Baltimore. But let's talk about some actual Ravens news that does not pertain to the Pro Bowl. We have pretty big news in the fact that on Friday you had Ravens president Dick Cass announcing his retirement. Pretty much the Ravens announced it, that he will be retiring from the Ravens, and in his place, Sashi Brown, the former Cleveland Browns general manager, he worked with Monumental Sports, so, overseeing the Washington Wizards, Washington Mystics, Capital City Go-Go. He will be coming in. He's not an NFL guy. He's more of like the analytical type guy. He is not just purely a sports guy. He has a wide breadth of skills, a wide breadth of experiences, and him coming in here to replace Dick Cass. I mean, first of all, let's not shade over the Dick Cass retirement, because he was somebody who was very monumental in shaping this organization. He first started off with the team, very early on in 2004. And yeah, it's something where it's a loss for the franchise. I know that he's not stepping on the field, and, he's not coaching or doing anything, but he oversees a lot of the operations, or he did. And when he steps down, you can hear it from many people within the organization, people whose lives have been changed by him based off of what he's been able to do. So that will be a big loss for the Ravens. But in his place in Sashi Brown, I mean, Brown is somebody who has done a lot, with his stops. Now, the Cleveland Browns stint was not impressive in terms of the actual, like success of the team. But I mean, people I've talked to have said that he had a plan, it just wasn't executed well. And so it seems like, for him, the ownership was kind of pushing back maybe a little bit on it. I don't know the full extent of the details, but I'm excited about this. It'll be a breath of fresh air, I think, for the organization. Not saying that Dick Cass was bad at his job, or that, this is such a great thing, because honestly, it's really unfortunate that he is stepping down and retiring. But again, congratulations to him, and, best of luck, best wishes in his next adventure. I mean, he certainly earned it for what he's done for this organization. And there have been some people who were saying, like, this is franchise altering because Sashi Brown's going to be making the decisions. Like, every decision goes through him now. That's not how this works. The team president, it does vary by organization. Like, I'm not saying that, the Ravens are going to do what the Browns did or what the Steelers did in terms of what their presidents are asked to do. But Brown is not going to be the be all end all of, like, hey, we're bringing in this guy. None of you can say anything about it. It's my decision. Maybe he'll have some say in some personnel things, but it'll more just be like operations, I feel like. And, he'll be overseeing all aspects of the team. So it's not just player personnel. It's not just this. It's not just that. He'll have a wide range of responsibilities, much like Dick Cass did. And, I think that the transition won't be as dramatic as people, first thought it might be. But again, congratulations to Dick Cass and his retirement and his next steps here and for his future. But finally here, let's talk a bit about Drew Wilkins. Now, Wilkins is somebody who got really just a ton of praise in the Ravens organization, widely regarded as a top flight, up and coming young coach. But it was reported by Jess Rubick that Drew Wilkins will not be returning to the Ravens coaching staff. The same thing happened with Rob Ryan, and the Ravens, much like we've seen over the course of their franchise history, the coaching turnover in some years can be rather heavy for this team, and we're starting to see it kind of take that shape again in 2022 with Bobby Ingram leaving for Wisconsin. You have Ryan and Martindale, and now Wilkins. Now what Rubick did say is that Wilkins was being mentored by Martindale. Martindale is a mentor for Wilkins. And so it feels like if Martindale does get a defensive coordinator job, Wilkins could follow him. But look, Mike McDonald wants to bring in a couple of his guys, right? I mean, that's not something that I think is bad. McDonald has come in here to reshape this Ravens defense and kind of make it his own. not completely change everything, but again, add his own twist and really do his thing. And to do that, he wants to bring in a couple of his own guys. And the reports are that Ryan Osborne, who is a Michigan assistant there, he's going to come in to Baltimore. Now, these reports have not been confirmed, but that is what the grapevine is saying right now, based off, if you look up Ryan Osborne, it's saying that a lot of Michigan media are on it. And the Michigan media was on the Mike McDonald thing first before Baltimore media picked it up. And with Ryan Osborne, it seems like the same thing is going on. So Osborne is actually credited with working with Aiden Hutchinson and David Ajabo and the defensive line group over there. So it feels like that Osborne would come in as that new outside linebackers coach or an outside linebacker assistant, defensive assistant. And the Zach Orr stuff, it's still there. There haven't been any necessarily updates on it, but it feels like he might be the guy for that inside linebacker job that Rob Ryan did vacate when he was, not returning to the staff. So yeah, if Osborne and Orr come in, I think those are two guys who are great and McDonald can work with. And, McDonald and Orr worked together when McDonald was in Baltimore during his first stint, because Orr worked with some of the linebackers and some of that stuff while McDonald was the linebackers coach. So again, crazy weekend of Ravens news and just notes and everything. But look, this franchise is showing that they are not going to stay complacent. They're going to do what they have to do to keep up with the rest of the league, which, we've seen over the course of these playoffs, there are a lot of really, really good teams. A lot of teams are going to get better during this offseason. I think the Ravens are going to be one of them. We'll continue to talk about that, of course, throughout these coming weeks and months. We'll head into our first break, though. When we get back, we'll dive into our first segment of answering Eric DeCosta's, what pretty much what he said to the media and kind of getting into his answers. So stay tuned for that. And we will be right back. Built Bar is the best tasting protein bar ever this time of year. New Year's resolutions, people can be giving up on them a little bit, but don't do that this year. Stick to your resolutions. And if yours is to eat right, Built Bars are the best thing for you. There are Built Bar Puffs too. If you haven't, you're missing out on one of Built Bar's best tasting bars. The Puffs are the first ever protein infused marshmallow. They're fluffy and marshmallowy, and they're not just a protein bar. They're a treat, and they're covered in 100% real chocolate. And all Built Bars, matter of fact, covered in 100% real chocolate. Yes, the Puffs included 100% real chocolate. They're low calorie, high protein. You can replace your candy bars with these. They're better than a candy bar. Most Built Bars do contain 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 4 net carbs, and 17 grams of protein. And there are so many flavors to choose from. So go to Built.com. Use promo code LOCKED15 and get 15% off your order. Use promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at Built.com. We're back here. It's our second segment of Locked On Ravens here on a Monday. Kevin Ostreicher, your host, still here with you. And the Ravens had a very busy week last week in terms of press conferences. They had three of them in 1 week. They had John Harbaugh on Monday, Mike McDonald on Wednesday, and finally Eric DeCosta on Friday. And we did talk a bit about what John Harbaugh and Mike McDonald had to say, but since Eric DeCosta's happened on Friday after our show was put out, we didn't have a chance to talk about it. So a lot of things that Eric DeCosta said were very noteworthy, and he was asked about a lot of noteworthy topics, and it was really interesting to hear his answers. Again, he was very detailed in his answers, which I said I was very appreciative of John Harbaugh doing that. And so for DeCosta, same thing. Let's start off. Let's talk about the Lamar Jackson talk, the Lamar Jackson extension talk. Let me clarify. He was asked about it, and he was asked about it multiple times in many different ways, trying to get some information out of him. And when asked about just where the talks stand and everything, pretty much he said that they're going to work at Lamar's pace and everything, and saying, it's an unusual negotiation. And he did say that Lamar Jackson and him have had about 5 or 6 different conversations at different points. And, Lamar Jackson is comfortable with where they're at right now, DeCosta said. And he said that there's an open line of communication between the two. Lamar Jackson can come and see him at any point. And that's really where it is. She didn't give a full, oh, hey, we're a little ballpark figure away, or we're a huge ballpark figure away. But he kind of went away from that and started saying, oh, we want to see him healthy. We want to see him get back, which, yes, obviously. And there were a couple other things that he was asked about the Lamar Jackson conversation and just, his relationship he has with him, which he said he's comfortable with it, and, the growth that he has shown, and all this different kind of stuff. But for Lamar Jackson and for this extension, it is very complicated. It is very unusual. And there have been little rumblings and reports that the Lamar Jackson extension will probably break $40 million a year, which yes, I do expect that. Some people are saying, well, he lost $5 million or $10 million a year because of the the bad stretch he had in 2021. I don't really see it that way. Like, I don't think the Ravens and Lamar Jackson are going to necessarily gripe over $1 or $2 million total in a contract. If it's a per year, maybe it's a different story because they're looking for as much cap room as they can get. Lamar Jackson's looking for, all the money he can get, and both sides have that right. I think Lamar Jackson has earned every single penny of the contract extension that he will sign with whoever it is. I think is going to be Baltimore, but whenever that does get signed, he has earned it. And for the Ravens, they have to figure out, hey, look, we're committing a huge part of our cap to one singular player when this extension does get signed, or if or whenever. So how are we going to maneuver around that? That's what they're asking themselves. For the Ravens, they might be in the same situation that they were in with Joe Flacco a little tiny bit. Now, the difference there is the fifth-year option has changed since the Joe Flacco days, where it's not kind of scaling with the rookie contract. It's scaling with accolades and achievements. So for Lamar Jackson, his fifth-year option cap figure is around $23 million. The Ravens feel confident that they can work with that, it seems like. And, if that's the cap that they have to go into the season with, I think, are all right with it. But an extension would save money on the cap this offseason. So ideally, I feel like they'd want to get it done before free agency starts, just to have that extra wiggle room to re-sign their own guys. Because we've talked about it. They have a lot of guys who they need to re-sign. Bradley Bozeman, Anthony Aver, Deshaun Elliott. Those are all players who the Ravens could look to re-sign, especially because of just the players that they are and what they have done. But we saw what Joe Flacco did. Joe Flacco did not waver. The Ravens offered him contract extension. He turned it down in his contract year. He said, I'm going to bet on myself. He bet on himself. And I think we all know the story of what happened. Joe Flacco won the Super Bowl. He bet on himself, and it paid off in a major way. And for any quarterback who wins a Super Bowl in a contract year, or even reaches it, you can say, big money is coming their way. Because it's one thing to have consistent regular season success. Like, that will get you a big contract. But to have Super Bowl appearances, Super Bowl championships, AFC championship appearances, that can tack on significant per year money or guarantees or whatever it may be, incentives. There's stuff to be had in that. And so Lamar Jackson, as many do know, his playoff success has been mediocre, I'd call it. I mean, the record has not been amazing, and he has not made it to an AFC championship game. He's not made it to a Super Bowl. He's not won a Super Bowl. So it wouldn't necessarily shock me if Jackson just says, hey, look, I want to bet on myself. That's what I want to do now, because I know that if I can make it to the AFC championship or make it to the Super Bowl or win the Super Bowl, that can make me $10, $20 million or, $5 million per year extra. You can kind of say that. And if that's the case, if that's where he wants to go with it, I'm not shocked at that. I don't blame him either. I mean, the Ravens and Lamar Jackson are working at this from their own sides, their own perspectives. And I think they understand the other's perspective, right? I mean, Lamar Jackson does not have an agent right now. He is representing himself. He's getting counsel, it seems like, from, different sources, but he does not have an official agent. So he's negotiating this himself, which for a contract of this scale is pretty unprecedented. So, DeCosta's right. It's a very interesting, unusual situation, but I was shocked when Josh Allen was the first to sign out of the quarterback class. I was pretty convinced it was going to be Jackson. I was not right in that, and that prediction was wrong. So now that Lamar Jackson saw the Josh Allen money, it feels like he's going to say, hey, look, if I can do something with 2022, if this team comes back fully healthy, if I have my full complement of weapons and we make it far, that's more money for him, and good for him if that's what he does. Good for him for betting on himself and doing that. But, there is a risk to both sides of this. For Jackson, if he has another down season, and I wouldn't even call 2021 a down season, because let's face it, the first part of the season, he was in the MVP conversation. The pass offense was looking great. Jackson was on pace for a ton of total yards, and then really the Miami game, the switch flipped, and not in a good way. So if he has another bad season in terms of the way that the week 10 on was, then you're not looking at, making money. Then it could be, am I losing money there? I don't know. I personally, again, wouldn't gripe over $1 or $2 million. But for the Ravens, it's, hey, if we sign him now, if we lock him in now, we don't have to, quote unquote, risk. I don't know if I call it a risk, but we don't have to risk him breaking out, winning a Super Bowl, paying him that much money. If I'm the Ravens, I want him to win the Super Bowl so I can pay him that money. I would trade that $5 million per year, $10 million per year for a Super Bowl championship. That's me. But, I feel like they might feel that same way. Super Bowl championships are paramount in this game. Obviously, it's your end goal. So he's hungry for it. Both sides are negotiating it. And again, it's kind of like a wait and see thing for them. And, DeCosta was also asked about the Bengals and just, they obviously won the division. They're in the Super Bowl. And he was asked about kind of countering the Bengals and about, hey, do you worry about kind of building a team for another team? Or do you just worry about your team and do things the Raven way, this, that, and the other? So he kind of said it was both ways. And he said the NFL was evolving and changing, which is completely accurate. And it was kind of what John Harbaugh was saying as well. DeCosta talked about how this league is ever evolving and ever changing, and the Bengals are tough to defend. And obviously teams like the Patriots, the Chiefs, the Steelers, the Bengals, you got to find a way to beat those guys. And, they have to find a way to do that. And they can adjust their ways, but at the end of the day, they can continue to trust their process, but still build things the way they the way they want to. So it's not like they have to completely flip and do a 180 and say like, oh, we're going to throw the ball 80 million times a game instead because, we have to keep up with this, that, and the other. The Ravens have proven success doing their style. Now we need to see if they can continue that. And they obviously have to adapt with the times. They can't just run the ball 80 million times a game and win. But at the same time, I think you have a head coach, a general manager who are on the same page about, yes, this team needs to evolve. It's not like they are completely in the gutter and being like, oh, wow, we have to reshape everything. But at the same time, there is a certain aspect of, oh, these Bengals are looking pretty good. And, oh, the Chiefs aren't going anywhere. And, oh, young Josh Allen, Mac Jones, Justin Herbert, all these young quarterbacks, they have to adjust and adapt. And I think that, Harbaugh, DeCosta have a plan to do so. And I'm excited to see how it ends up turning out for them, especially because, with what this team has, they have the pieces. A lot of people forget about just the pieces they'll be getting back. And we'll see if they're at full strength. I assume most of them will be, but you really never know with injuries and especially big ones. But the Ravens lost so much. Getting those guys back, getting a good bill of health, like if they can get lucky with injuries like the Bengals and some of these teams did, and that's not a knock on them, but if they can get lucky with injuries, if they can add and just continue to evolve, I think this team, the sky really is the limit for them in a very talented, very competitive AFC and just NFL in general. We'll head into our final break here, though. When we get back, we'll be continuing to talk about Eric DeCosta's answers from his end-of-season press conference. So stay tuned for that, and we'll be right back. Hey, Ravens fans, this is Kevin Oestreicher with an incredible app everyone who buys gas needs to know about in Get Upside. Just download the free Get Upside app in the App Store or Google Play right now and use promo code TOUCHDOWN for 25 cents per gallon or more on your first fill of cash back. Don't pay full price at the pump anymore. Get cash back using Get Upside. Just download the app for free and use promo code TOUCHDOWN for 25 cents per gallon or more on your first tank. Some people who drive a lot are making as much as $200 to $300 a year in cash back, and there's no catch. The cash back is added right to your account. You can cash out anytime to your bank account, PayPal, or a gift card for Amazon and other brands. Just download the free Get Upside app and use promo code TOUCHDOWN to get 25 cents per gallon or more cash back on your first tank. That's code TOUCHDOWN. We're back here. Our final segment of Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher, your host, still here with you. And let's continue to dive into what Eric DeCosta had to say in his end-of-season press conference on Friday. Now, this is really interesting because we've talked about this here on the show before, and I'm referencing Ronnie Stanley. Stanley is a player who's uber talented. He's friend of the show, Ronnie Stanley. He's been on this show before. I've talked to Ronnie Stanley before, and he's a world-class guy, world-class player, and just a world-class person. And unfortunately for Stanley, he suffered a gruesome, horrible ankle injury in the 2020 season. The replays don't watch them, just don't do it. It was bad. And DeCosta talked a bit about, he was asked about the rehabilitation of Stanley and being like, kind of where's the rehab with Stanley? Where is he right now? And he actually got into a bit about he didn't want to assume that Ronnie Stanley was going to be back healthy, but he did say it was probably his mistake that he did assume that Ronnie Stanley was back, or he said expecting. He didn't want to use assuming, but he said, unfortunately, that wasn't the case. And his understanding was that Ronnie Stanley would come back that year and play good football, be healthy, be good to go. But he did acknowledge it was a big setback because Stanley's one of their best players. And it's unfortunate that that's the end of that for him, at least the end of the 2021 season was, hey, he played in the Raiders game, looked nothing like himself, was shut down for the rest of the year, had another surgery, and that was that. So DeCosta did say that, yeah, the draft's going to be a resource for them. And it's a good thing because we have talked about how the Ravens did bank on the health of Ronnie Stanley on the show before. We have talked about it. And it was, at the end of the day, you can look in hindsight and say, yeah, that was not a great decision. And, we've had multiple people come on the show before and talk about the tackle depth issues. Matthew Stevens, Spencer Schultz has come on and talked about it. Cole Jackson has talked about it. Ingraven's talked about it. The tackle depth has been lacking over these past couple of seasons. This isn't just like a 2021 thing. They have not had amazing tackle depth for a little while now. But if they can add a playmaker in the draft, a really solid guy, maybe another versatile tackle who can play on both sides, just in case of, another setback for Stanley, which, hopefully will not happen, but there is a possibility of it. Stanley has not played a full season in his entire NFL career. If you can do that, you have Juwan James coming in. I don't anticipate Alejandro Villanueva returning. I think they can save money there, and his play wasn't consistent enough for me to be confident in bringing him back. So I feel like if you can do that, then I think the Ravens are in good shape there. Obviously, Stanley's your plan A, right? You want to have him on the field. But, a pretty good plan B is making sure you have the depth necessary and talent at that. So if they use a first-round pick on a tackle and a fourth, or a second-round pick on a tackle and a fifth, that's not a bad place to be, but they did see Patrick McCary step in and play really well. So, we'll kind of see where that all ends up going. And for DeCosta, he also talked a lot about Marcus Peters. And Peters is one of the players within the Ravens who, really ever since coming to the team in 2019 has been amazing for them. And somebody who has been a Raven almost, because, you can talk about a lot of, guys who have come to this organization as veterans and have kind of adapted that mentality of, hey, I'm a player like a Raven, guys who have liked their time in Baltimore. And for Marcus Peters, he's a player who has been good for them. But obviously the storyline for him in 2021 was that he tore his ACL before the season starts. He's done for the year. Now he carries a $15.5 million cap hit, which some deem to be too much. The Ravens can save a lot of money, $10 million when cutting Marcus Peters. But when DeCosta was asked about Marcus Peters and just, where his status, I guess you call it, stands with the organization, he talked about him in the most positive way. He goes, "Oh, I love Marcus Peters. I love him." He goes, "I love Marcus. I talk to Marcus quite a bit. Marcus is one of those guys. When he comes to your organization, he provides such an authentic perspective on what this game is all about. He's a Raven. He's one of those rare guys that played for other teams, and there's been other guys like him. He talks about Mike McCrary and Anquan Bolden, Steve Smith Sr., Matt Burke, and he says that he would expect Marcus to be in Baltimore. He's doing his rehab, and he thinks he's doing extremely well, and he can't wait to see him. So that's great. That's great news. I am on team. Bring Marcus Peters back. I think he means too much to this team. When he was going back to Washington, let's go back to his college days at Washington. When he was at Washington, when he was in Kansas City, even a bit in Los Angeles, there were things of, he's such a bad teammate. He can't be someone who you get along with. He's too hot-headed. He had problems at Washington and in Kansas City. There were issues there, but he got to the Rams, and, people who know him from the Rams, they talk so glowingly about him. Even people from Kansas City and Washington do the same thing. The Ravens have brought in these, quote unquote, like bad apples, right? Like, Des Bryant was one who were like, oh, is he really going to come in and do that? And Steve Smith Sr. was another where he's like, oh, he's too hot-headed. Peters is someone who, there were some character concerns with him. He is shown to be a bit hot-headed at times, but that's going back super, super early. Peters, when he was acquired by Baltimore, is like, oh, really, like a case like this, but he has come in. He has gotten along with everybody in the organization. He said in an interview before the season, he's like, yeah, being with the Ravens brought my joy back for the game. It's just a huge testament to the organization, what they're about. But two, for a player like Peters, who is so loved in this organization, if you cut him and save $10 million, you're losing an all-pro, your second best corner. And where are you going to spend that money on another corner? Like, is it going to go to Anthony Averett? Maybe. Is it going to go to another corner? Maybe. Are there better corners than Marcus Peters? Yes. But Peters knows the system. He's familiar. We'll see how he looks coming off his ACL, but I'm with DeCosta, and DeCosta's calling the shot, so I'm going to go with him. and say that Marcus Peters will be back in Baltimore in 2021, barring something very unexpected. I'm going to trust the guy who makes the decisions and what the guy who makes the decisions says. And if he says that Marcus Peters is coming back, or excuse me, most likely coming back, then I'm going to roll with that too. And that's something I'm very excited about, because he's somebody who is he's just amazing for them. And he also talked a little bit about some of the other injuries, like with J.K. Dobbins, and just how the season was so crazy overall with injuries, and said that, these guys are doing well and everything. But, at the end of the day, he said that there are always injuries and they've always had injuries. So there is a process, but, the Ravens and their injuries, it'll be tough for them to assess where they are heading into next season. And DeCosta kind of talked about how it will be a bit tougher from that standpoint, because it's almost like he said, when did these guys come back situation? And he says he has a lot of confidence they will come back, but they don't know the timing. So when you look to what they can do in free agency and the draft, it doesn't necessarily just throw everything out of proportion, but it does cloud things a little bit, because you're looking at it and you're saying, well, let's say J.K. Dobbins, for example. If J.K. Dobbins doesn't come back by week 1 and we're stuck with, Gus Edwards and who else on the roster, right? Because Latavius Murray's a free agent. Devonta Freeman's a free agent. You don't have any options behind a guy like Gus Edwards if Edwards is the guy who returns and Dobbins has a setback, let's say. Knock on wood, he does not. But if that's the case, how do you assess that? Do you overcompensate? I mean, I think you do. I think this team has been so good at building depth over the years that you have to overcompensate in some areas, some situations. Like example for Tyus Bowser, who tore his Achilles in week 18 against the Steelers, you have to overcompensate there. Because John Harbaugh, he said his timeline is, hey, he's going to be back by training camp. He's going to, maybe he'll do that. You have to overcompensate there. So DeCosta understands that the injuries are going to maybe have a big impact on, whether it's the draft or free agency or after the draft. He did say they have to sign more players. They had to activate a lot more players and just do a lot of guys. And even just talking about the season, the 2021 season, he said he had to sign more guys, activate more guys, elevate more guys. And it's not ideal for them. And he said that they had opportunities to make trades, but the money just wasn't there because they kept having to sign guys, and that kind of depletes their pool. And, it's unfortunate. So overall, I think the Ravens are in a good spot right now. I know that the disappointing end to their season doesn't necessarily calm any nerves or anything, and this is a very pivotal offseason for the franchise, but I think DeCosta knows what he's doing. He has put the team in right situations. Is he perfect? No. But we'll learn a lot about him this offseason, and a lot about the team in terms of where they want to go, what they want to do, and just what this team will look like heading into the 2022 season. That's all I have for you here today, though, on Locked On Ravens. When we get back here tomorrow, we'll be diving into more Ravens talk. So stay tuned for that, and I will see you tomorrow.